long before her name became a warning, before it became a curse whispered to frighten children, before it was etched into shields and blades as a symbol of terror, Medusa was a girl who was seen. Not watched, not feared, seen. She was born at the edge of the mortal world, where the sea met stone, and the wind carried salt and prophecy in equal measure. The island had no name worth remembering, and perhaps that is why it survived as long as it did. The gods rarely bothered with places that did not ask to be remembered. Medusa grew beneath an open sky, with no walls tall enough to block the sun. Her childhood was unremarkable, in the way that all peaceful childhoods are, quiet, fleeting, and invisible to history. But beauty has a way of attracting history. By the time she reached womanhood, people noticed her not because she demanded attention, but because attention bent toward her without permission. Her hair fell dark and heavy like unspilled ink. Her face carried symmetry so exact it unsettled those who looked too long. Her eyes, soft, human, unguarded, made people feel as though they had been gently uncovered. She did not know she was beautiful. That knowledge always comes from others, and others noticed. Word traveled beyond the island. Travelers spoke of a girl whose presence lingered after she left a room. Sailors altered their routes just to glimpse her. Priests murmured. Mothers warned their sons. Fathers locked their doors earlier. And somewhere far above the clouds, a goddess took offense. Athena, born armored and unyielding, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and restraint, heard Medusa's name spoken too often. Beauty, ungoverned, was a kind of chaos. And chaos, when left unchecked, disrupted order. Athena did not hate Medusa. Hatred would have required effort. She simply decided the girl must be controlled. So Athena offered Medusa sanctuary. The temple stood carved from pale stone, immaculate and cold. Within its walls, desire was forbidden, emotions disciplined, and devotion demanded. Medusa was invited, not forced, not threatened. Chosen, to serve, to remain untouched, to belong to the goddess alone. Medusa accepted, not because she understood the cost, but because refusal had never been presented as an option. Inside the temple, time slowed. Days passed in ritual and silence. Medusa learned discipline. She learned how to make herself smaller without realizing she was shrinking. And the world forgot her. Almost. But gods do not forget beauty. Poseidon, ruler of the seas, stormbringer, earthshaker, passed through the temple one day, not in reverence, but curiosity. He saw Medusa kneeling in silence, her devotion raw and unquestioning, and he wanted her, not for love, not for companionship, for possession. The myths say many things about what happened next. Some say Medusa tempted him, some say she welcomed him, some say she deserved what followed, but myths are written by those who survive, and Medusa did not survive as herself. The truth is quieter. Poseidon did not ask. The temple walls did not protect her. The goddess did not intervene. And when it was over, Medusa remained kneeling, broken not in body, but in certainty. She waited for Athena. She believed justice would come. She believed devotion meant protection. Athena arrived, and Athena was furious, not at Poseidon, at Medusa, because gods do not punish power, they punish reminders of their own limitations. Athena looked upon Medusa and saw not a great person, victim, but a flaw in her order, a priestess who had been touched, a symbol of imperfection within her domain. And so Athena delivered judgment. Not death, something worse. She transformed Medusa into a warning. Hair twisted into living serpents, forever whispering, forever watching. Skin hardened with a chill no sun could warm. Eyes infused with a power Medusa never asked for, a gaze that turned life into stone. Athena did not say, "This is punishment." She said, "This is protection. No man will ever harm you again." And then she left. Medusa screamed, but screams mean nothing to gods. Banished from the world of people, Medusa fled to the farthest edge of existence, where stone outnumbered voices, and the wind had forgotten language. There she lived, not as a monster, but as something worse, a symbol. Men came for her, heroes, always heroes. They came seeking glory, proof of courage, the thrill of killing something feared. They never spoke to her. They never asked who she had been. They only saw the snakes. And one by one, they froze, faces locked in terror, mouths open mid-prayer, swords mid-swing. Medusa did not celebrate their deaths. She mourned them. Each statue was a reminder that the world had decided she was no longer human enough to understand. Time passed. It always does. And eventually, a boy named Perseus was sent to kill her. Not for justice, for a trophy. Perseus did not arrive like the others. He did not shout challenges into the wind, or announce his name to the cliffs. He did not come drunk on courage, or blinded by arrogance. He came quietly, guided by hands far older than his own. The gods had prepared him. Athena watched from above, her expression unreadable behind polished bronze. Hermes walked beside the boy for part of the journey, light-footed and careless, as if this were only another errand. They gave Perseus gifts and called them blessings, a mirrored shield, so he would never have to look at Medusa directly, winged sandals, so the ground would never claim him, a blade sharp enough to cut through fate itself. They did not tell him who Medusa had been. They told him only what she was now, a monster, a danger, a mistake that needed erasing. Perseus believed them. He had grown up hearing her name spoken with fear, woven into stories meant to teach obedience. Monsters existed so that heroes could exist beside them. This was the order of things. Still, as he crossed the barren lands where Medusa lived, Perseus felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. The statues came first. They stood scattered like forgotten prayers, men frozen mid-run, mid-plea, mid-hope. Some were armed. One held a flower that would never wilt, because it would never live again. These were not warriors poised in triumph. These were people caught in surprise. Perseus slowed. No song accompanied his steps now. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. He followed the path of stone bodies until the land narrowed into a hollow carved by centuries of isolation. There, among twisted rock and shadows that refused to settle, Medusa slept. She did not sleep peacefully. Her rest was shallow, broken by dreams that replayed endlessly. Temple walls, cold marble beneath her knees, silence where protection should have been. Even in sleep, her snakes stirred, sensing the approach of another ending. Perseus hid. He raised the shield, watching her reflection instead of her form. What he saw unsettled him. This was no raging beast. Medusa's face, even reflected, was still human. Her expression, relaxed by sleep, carried exhaustion rather than malice. Her body bore no hunger for violence, only stillness, only solitude. For the first time, Perseus hesitated. Heroes are rarely remembered for their hesitation. Athena's presence pressed down upon him, heavy as expectation. He could feel her watching, not with eyes, but with intent. This was not about Medusa anymore. This was about obedience. So Perseus moved. The blade fell once. Clean, practiced, silent. Medusa did not wake. Her death was merciful only in speed. The world shuddered as if it had witnessed something irreversible. From her severed neck spilled not only blood, but consequences long delayed. The earth drank deeply, the air recoiled, and from Medusa's body life emerged. Pegasus, winged and wild, burst into existence, a creature born of violation and ending, beauty torn from tragedy. He did not look back. Neither did Perseus. He placed Medusa's head into a sack, careful not to meet her gaze even in death. The snake still moved, still hissed, still guarded what remained of her. Athena descended. She did not mourn. She praised Perseus. She took the head, mounted it upon her shield, and declared victory. But stories do not end when heroes leave. Medusa's body lay forgotten among stone and shadow, yet her presence did not fade. The power placed upon her eyes did not die with her. It lingered, seeping into myth, into memory, into fear passed down through generations. People spoke her name less as a person, and more as a warning. They forgot the girl, they remembered the monster, and Athena ensured it stayed that way. She used Medusa's gaze as a weapon, turning enemies to stone without consequence. The irony was never acknowledged. Justice, when wielded by gods, does not require reflection. Yet something unexpected happened. Medusa became immortal. Not in flesh, in story. Artists carved her face into temples, ships, and shields, not always in terror, but in reverence. Mothers whispered her name to daughters, not as a curse, but as a lesson. A reminder of what happens when power is taken without permission and punishment follows the victim instead of the crime. Slowly, quietly, Medusa changed. She became a symbol, not of monstrosity, but of rage that survived injustice, of beauty that refused to disappear, of a woman who was punished for being seen and remembered anyway. Some stories say her spirit still wanders, not as a ghost, but as a presence felt when eyes meet and truths are revealed. That the fear people feel when confronted by her image is not terror of stone, but fear of recognition. Because Medusa forces the world to look, and the world has never liked what it sees. So her story endures, not because she was slain, but because she was wronged. And the stone figures left behind, silent, eternal, stand not as her victims, but as witnesses. Athena never spoke of Medusa again, not openly. The shield bearing Medusa's head became legend, feared on battlefields and celebrated in temples. Enemies fell into stone silence, wars ended without mercy, and Athena was praised as brilliant, unstoppable, righteous. The gods applauded efficiency. Mortals applauded victory. But gods, for all their power, are not untouched by memory. Athena began to dream. In her dreams, she stood again inside the temple, not as a goddess, but as a watcher trapped behind her own eyes. She saw marble floors stained not with blood, but with absence. She heard no prayers, only the echo of kneeling. Medusa never spoke in these dreams. She only looked. And Athena, goddess of wisdom, found herself unable to meet that gaze. The dreams did not weaken Athena. Gods are not weakened by guilt the way mortals are. Instead, they calcified. Athena became sharper, colder, more exacting. She demanded stricter devotion from her priestesses. Purity became law. Silence became virtue. And slowly, without realizing it, Athena began building temples, not to wisdom, but to control. Meanwhile, Medusa's name traveled. It crossed seas, borders, centuries. Each retelling chipped away at the girl and exaggerated the monster. Snakes grew larger in description. Her cruelty expanded. Her sorrow vanished. This is how myths survive, by simplifying pain until it is palatable. Yet there were places where the older story lingered. In villages where women told different versions at night. In carvings where Medusa's eyes looked mournful, not violent. In symbols worn as protection, not warning. The Gorgoneon, Medusa's face, was placed above doorways to ward off evil. People said, It repelled monsters. But perhaps it repelled something else. Perhaps it repelled injustice. Because Medusa did not turn the innocent to stone. She turned attackers. She turned those who came with violence in their hands and entitlement in their hearts. The statues left behind were not random. They were patterns. And somewhere beyond Olympus, beyond mortal lands, beyond even the underworld, Medusa existed still. Not as a soul trapped in punishment, but as an idea refusing to die. In the realm where stories go when they are told too often, Medusa waited. This realm had no shape. It was formed of memory and belief. Every time her name was spoken, she became clearer. Every time her story was twisted, she shifted. She was no longer bound to snakes or stone. She was bound to meaning. Here, she remembered everything. She remembered the girl she had been. She remembered the silence after Poseidon left. She remembered Athena's eyes, not cruel, but afraid. And for the first time, Medusa understood. She had not been punished because she was guilty. She had been punished because she was inconvenient. This realization did not bring peace. It brought clarity. And clarity is dangerous. Across ages, artists painted her not as hideous, but beautiful. Writers questioned the tale. Thinkers asked why the monster never chased, never hunted, never left her cave, why heroes always came to her, why gods were never held accountable. Each question strengthened her presence. Each doubt cracked the stone of the old narrative. Athena felt this shift. She felt her symbol slipping. So she adapted. Gods always do. Athena reframed Medusa, not as a victim, but as a necessary evil, a lesson, a warning against disobedience, a justification wrapped in moral language. And many believed it. But belief is not permanence. Time erodes even divine authority. In later ages, when gods faded and temples crumbled, Medusa remained. Her image survived on shields, coins, murals, tattoos. She transformed from cautionary tale into emblem of defiance. Women invoked her not in fear, but in solidarity. Artists gave her eyes that reflected pain instead of rage. Medusa was reclaimed instead of curses. And this, more than her death, terrified the gods, because a monster that stays a monster can be controlled, but a monster that is understood becomes unstoppable. In the end, Medusa did not need revenge. She did not need justice delivered by divine hands. She had something far more enduring: truth. Her story, once stripped of embellishment, revealed a pattern older than Olympus and more persistent than myth. Power protects itself by rewriting pain. And Medusa became the proof. She stands now not at the edge of the world, but at the edge of understanding. Her gaze no longer turns flesh to stone. It turns lies brittle. It forces stillness. It demands that those who look at her see what they would rather ignore. That monsters are often created. That silence is often enforced. That survival is not villainy. So when her name is spoken now, it carries more than fear. It carries recognition. And perhaps that is why her eyes still haunt us. Not because we fear becoming stone, but because deep down, we fear realizing we were looking away all along. The modern world did not erase Medusa. It simply renamed her. As gods lost their temples and myths were folded into textbooks, Medusa slipped quietly into other shapes. She appeared in art galleries under softer lighting, in poems written by people who sensed something wrong with the old versions of the tale. She surfaced in dreams where women woke with the feeling of having been watched, not judged, not threatened, but understood. The story no longer needed Olympus. It lived in human behavior. In every age there were those who were looked at too closely, wanted too intensely, punished too harshly. In every age there were authorities who explained injustice as necessity, violence as order, silence as virtue. Medusa learned to recognize herself in these repetitions. She was no longer bound to stone caverns or distant shores. She existed wherever blame followed harm instead of the other way around, wherever victims were transformed into warnings, wherever power remained untouched. And so her image evolved. The snakes, once symbols of horror, became symbols of vigilance, creatures that never closed their eyes, that sensed vibration before danger arrived. That struck only when threatened. People began to understand the snakes were not a curse, they were armor. Medusa's gaze, too, was reinterpreted. It was no longer seen as a weapon of cruelty, but as a mirror so honest it paralyzed those unprepared to face themselves. Stone was not punishment, it was exposure. To be turned to stone was to be frozen in the truth of one's intent, forever unable to rewrite the moment. This is why heroes stopped coming. There were no more quests to slay Medusa, because the world slowly realized she was no longer hiding. She was no longer waiting to be found. She was already present. Athena faded with the others, her name surviving mostly in institutions, philosophies, and ideals that outlived belief. But Medusa did not fade. She moved closer to the human heart, where myths are reborn as symbols rather than gods. And in that place, where story becomes reflection, Medusa finally spoke. Not in words, in resonance. Those who felt unseen began to feel watched over. Those who had been blamed for their own suffering felt their shame loosen. Artists painted her eyes softer. Writers gave her back her voice. Sculptors carved her face not twisted, but calm, defiant without rage. Medusa no longer needed revenge. Her existence itself was the correction. She became a threshold figure, standing between what is tolerated and what is confronted, between silence and acknowledgement, between myth and truth. Some say that when someone finally understands Medusa's story, not the monster but the woman, they experience a strange stillness, as if something ancient has placed a hand on their shoulder and asked them to look again. Not away, but closer. That is her final transformation, not from woman to monster, but from monster back to meaning. And this is why her story survives every retelling. Because Medusa is not about snakes or stone or heroes. She is about what happens when power refuses responsibility. She is about how easily justice is redirected. She is about how stories are weaponized and how they can be reclaimed. In the end, Medusa did not escape her fate. She outgrew it. And the world, slowly learning to listen, is still catching up.